Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've read where you've classified the film not as a love story, but as a story about love. And what's that distinction to you?
I think that distinction to me is that, to me a love story usually is about falling in love and that initial magical period. A story about love, to me, indicates all of the difficulties and complications that go along with loving someone for a long period of time through that initial period to a period where you're used to each other, where you're not, you're not necessarily immediately excited to see that person. You live with that person, you see them every single day,
right.
And how do you survive through that? Especially if it doesn't match up with what you've been taught to believe love is supposed to be. I mean, we all would love to be, some kind of Prince Charming or something like that, but what happens after you sweep the princess off her feet and you take her to the castle? That's a long life. Happily ever after lasts a long time. It's hard not to get on each other's nerves. So, I mean, that was sort of the distinction for me, is that they're not always loving each other in this story, but it still is about love at the end of the day.
And your writer-director on this film, he actually penned this as a play and played your role. Is that correct?
Yeah, he wrote and directed the play version of this about 4 years before we started to shoot, and he got a couple awards for it, and he played Peter. And I guess on the basis of that, he was able to raise enough money for the film version. And one of the giant changes that he made was to make the two characters about 10 years younger. I think he felt like their immaturity would give these characters a little bit more hope. Maybe they're just working through these things initially, and their patterns might not be so set in stone that this is where they're headed for the rest of their lives.
It is a unique, and you made mention of this, it is a unique structure in that it jumps around in terms of time. It's out of sequence. For you, what does that give the arc of that relationship and how that relationship progresses as you watch the movie, other than just being a unique kind of...
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, I remember when I was reading it, I was going, wow, this is really unique, but then that's not the whole test of the script. It's, well, what happens when all the pieces are put together? Is it an interesting portrait, or does it not work? And, what I think that the structure does is take it from being a story that we're used to seeing, and it turns it into like a study or a portrait. So that you get to see their patterns, and you get to see, you get a sense of their future and of their past even a little bit more, because and you have more insight into their relationship than even they do, because a lot of times the audience is asked to go along for the ride, and you fall in love with the person at the same time that the other character does, and you go on the whole journey exactly with them, whereas this one separates you from them and allows you to see who they are, to see where their buttons are, so that when you see one of their buttons starting to get pushed, you can know what's about to happen. And it just sort of, I think it plays up. I also think it makes you feel closer to them. When you see them in a huge knockdown, drag-out fight, you've just seen them be completely in love with each other. So it's not like in order to get to that fight, you've had to drag them through things getting worse and worse and worse until they're fighting like that, and you think, well, they should definitely not be together. You still see the good parts because they're all right next to each other. So
right. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about the film festival experience, because I know you've been to film festivals with Peter and Vandy. Actually, my girlfriend has nothing but great things to say about you. She met you and hung out with you a little bit at AFI Dallas.
Oh, man, that was a great festival.
Yes. What do you take from those festival experiences?
They're kind of like my food. I mean, the festivals, those audiences are the ones who are telling me whether or not I'm on the right path. I mean, truly, I especially in the independent film world, it's not like, everyone's making millions of dollars, and you're basically making a movie that you believe in, for nothing more than the desire to tell that story. And so when you get to go to a festival and you see that story told, and you get to interact with the people who have just heard that story for the first time, if they like it, it's the best gift ever. I mean, you can't buy that kind of reaction. You can't put enough explosions in your movie to get that true reaction. And the other thing about film festivals is the audience is all film. They're all film lovers. They're there because they've paid attention to their publications that are telling them that there's an independent film festival right over here. And I've met people who have driven 100 miles to get to their film festival that's the closest to them, and that is one of the most heartening things I've ever heard. And I think it shows that there is a real desire for a choice. We get so much shoved down our throats that when we see something that is a small little miracle, like pretty much every independent film is, because if it's gotten to the point where it's in a festival at all, it's been finished. They've finished shooting it, they've finished editing it, somehow they've gotten it all together. It didn't fall apart at any point like so many do. So it's just exciting to share that and to talk to people about it, and listen to the conversations that are brought up by it, instead of conversations like, well, what would happen if, alien robots came down, and I mean, there's a certain amount of conversation and rhetoric, I guess, that can be brought up by those kind of movies. But I think that generally people are looking for something new, and it's I mean, the film festival experience is something that is my most valued experience in my whole life. If a film that I'm in is going to a festival, I will do everything I possibly can to get there.